Welcome back to episode 4 of The Silent Siren, where we bring to light the silent struggles first responders face while battling PTSD. I'm your host, Jason Demo. Today's episode is entitled Full Smile, Empty Heart, Pretending Everything is Okay. But before we dive into it, I want to briefly discuss my 1-week break that I took from the podcast. I know a few people were asking me about it. But when I decided to start this podcast, I originally wanted to keep a weekly cadence with episode releases, and it helps keep me consistent and disciplined in this journey. But it's also good for you, the listeners, to know that there are consistent episodes every week. So that consistency is good. But last week, I kind of felt like I should take a short break during the 4th of July. So I decided not to record an episode. Part of the reason for that is because recording these episodes, I kind of told you guys before, it takes a lot out of me. I spend some time throughout the week kind of just jotting down show notes and roughly planning out what I'm going to talk about and just kind of a little bit of a structure. I don't want these episodes to feel rigid, but I also want to make sure they're structured well. So I put some work in ahead of time, just ahead of recording them for you guys. And it's important for me to make sure these episodes don't come across like I'm just rambling and tossing out whatever happens to be on my mind and just kind of discombobulated. So with that said, I've told you guys before that I'm also just kind of talking about a lot of things during these episodes that I've never talked about before, or some of the things I talk about are things that I haven't even thought about for a long time either. It's definitely a good thing for me to discuss them, but it takes a lot out of me mentally, which in turn physically exhausts me. It can really take a lot out of me physically as well, even though I'm not really doing anything physical. So I took a week off for the holiday and focused on a few personal things. And on the 4th of July, I went and saw a Journey tribute band that was playing in town for the holiday, and they were great and I had an awesome time. And I also went to Lexington this past week and saw Creed, which I've been a massive fan of since middle school. And additionally, I've kind of been spending a lot of time outside working on our property. I've been kind of cleaning up the landscaping around our house and chopping down all the overgrowth around our pond and trimming trees and just doing all kinds of work in our pastures and whatnot. And I also installed a new shower in our workshop. The old one was falling apart and the base was leaking, so it needed to be replaced. And I'm not a plumber by any means, so it was kind of a challenging task that took quite a bit of time, but it felt like a great accomplishment once I finished it. And not to rabbit trail here, but I think doing hard things is really good for your mental health, especially trying new things or figuring out things or just learning something new or problem solving. And I hate paying other people to do things that I can figure out on my own. So I've gone out and I've earned a master's degree in Google and a doctorate in YouTube. And so I've kind of neglected some of these property maintenance things a bit lately, so it's been good to spend some time outside working on the property and knocking some things off my to-do list, and I find that therapeutic. Anyways, if you were bummed that another episode didn't come out last week, I apologize, but I needed some me time, and that's something that I'm trying to do a better job of recently, and I'm sure some of you can probably relate to that. But I do plan to maintain a weekly cadence with these new episodes, but I'm not willing to commit 100% to that, as I don't want to feel forced to record even when I need a break. So that's kind of my goal, is to do it weekly, but I'm not going to hold myself to it if I need a break. But with that said, let's get into my opening story before we dive into the episode topic. And this one's fairly short this week, but I think it's worth mentioning. But a few days ago, I was standing in line at Walmart, and I was waiting to enter the self-checkout area. And there was a couple checking out at the register that was like right next to where I was standing. I was the first person in line waiting to go into that kind of rectangular self-checkout area. And they were checking out right by that entry area. And while I was standing there, the man picked up this like large cooler that he was purchasing probably for the 4th of July, and he scanned it. And after he scanned it, he quickly spun around with it in his hands, like to put it back kind of in or like on the cart, and it hit me. Like he hit me with it. And it was definitely an accident, so no big deal. But then the guy just stared at me. He looked like dead at me and had this look like, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? No apology or anything, like no remorse over it. And I got the vibe instantly that he really, really wanted me to say something to him about it. And like in a very, very short amount of time, my mind went a million miles an hour. My mind just kind of processed the potential outcome of the situation, like while I was deciding what to do. And I could tell he wanted me to say something, but I thought about how that was going to go, like how is that going to play out. And I figured if I said something, he was going to want to start some type of confrontation, like definitely verbal, maybe even physical. I don't know. I could tell he was irritable and was just kind of like challenging me, like, what's up, dude? What are you going to do? And so my mind just kept kind of processing this, and I just told myself, not worth it. It is not worth it. Like, yes, it was very rude of him to hit me with a cooler and not apologize, like even though I'm fairly certain it was an accident. And yes, like the polite thing to do and the like socially acceptable thing to do would be to apologize. That's what most of us would do. And yes, like on my end, like it would be a reasonable response for me to like mention it to him politely, be like, hey dude, like you hit me. However, like while my mind was processing all these potential outcomes of me speaking to him, I just kept thinking again, like, it's not worth it. This is not worth it. It wasn't worth getting into an argument with a stranger in the Walmart self-checkout line. It certainly wasn't worth it potentially turning into some type of physical altercation, like you never know these days. And I was carrying at the time. I always have a gun on me. And I think that that's something you should always consider, like prior to getting into any type of altercation with someone, verbal or physical. So I just stood there and I took it. And I didn't say anything, didn't say a word. And after a couple seconds, it felt like a while, but it was probably only a couple seconds, he turned away and continued to ring up his items. And then he and his wife or girlfriend, whoever it was, they left. And so I told you all back in episode 1 that one of the ways my PTSD started showing up in my life was how I would kind of hope for or seek out confrontation, like especially towards the end of my law enforcement career. I was just kind of actively seeking it out and looking for it. And I don't go looking for fights these days, but I can definitely be irritable and I can definitely instigate things when I shouldn't. But I consider this situation in Walmart, like as small as it may be, like a big win, though, for me. I was able to just stand there and take it. I didn't feel obligated to speak up or defend myself. Well, that's probably not true now that I think about it. Like, I definitely had the desire to speak up, but it wasn't like I was looking for a fight or anything like that. But I still think that's like a win that I wanted to share with you guys. Like, I identified this situation. It bothered me. I shut up. I swallowed my pride. I just kept my mouth shut. Didn't retaliate. Didn't say anything. Even though I probably had the right to say something, and I definitely was in the right in the situation. It's not like I did anything wrong, and I could have said something and had every right to say something if I wanted to, but I didn't. So I'll take it. That's my story for the week, and I'm happy about it. But with that said, let's dive into today's episode, which, like I said earlier, I've entitled today's episode "Full Smile, Empty Heart, Pretending Everything is Okay." And I want to talk about how I've used just kind of an outgoing and funny and sociable personality to mask and hide my mental health struggles from everyone around me for many, many years now. And I'm sure a lot of you out there can relate to that. Like, a lot of us, we walk around and pretend everything is okay when in reality we're not okay. And I often think about and laugh, like we lie to each other every time we're like, hey, how's it going? We always say, oh, good, or okay, or fine, or whatever. Like, imagine if we were honest Like if somebody was like, "Hey, how you doing?" You're like, pretty horrible. I'm severely depressed right now, suffering from anxiety. I thought about suicide last night." Like somebody, like you would blow somebody's mind. They'd be like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't want the truth. I was just being polite." Like it's socially unacceptable to answer that question honestly, and we just pretend everything's okay all the time. And that's just kind of crazy, but that's how our society is. But going back to kind of my childhood, like thinking back, like I've always been fairly extroverted. I liked being with people, and I liked doing things with friends, and I enjoyed hanging out with kids at school, and I absolutely loved team sports. And when I was in like a group, I would always joke around. I loved to make people laugh, like even at a very young age. And when I was younger, I was very, very skinny. Like my rookie year in law enforcement, I was 145 pounds. That's a story for another day. But I've always been a very, very skinny person for most of my life. And I was pretty skinny and kind of nerdy, and I would get picked on at school. So like I rapidly developed a very quick wit. Like you might be bigger and you might be stronger and cooler and more popular than me, but I will beat you in a verbal contest every time. And that was just kind of my defense mechanism in coping growing up. And looking back to like just even in class, like I was often the class clown. Like I wasn't like disruptive, but I would make a lot of jokes and be funny. And I liked kind of being the life of the party, like maybe not the most outgoing or most funny person in the room, but I was definitely gonna have a good time, and I was gonna make people laugh. And I could be social with anyone, kind of anywhere. And I really just enjoyed doing things with people. I didn't like sitting at home doing nothing. I liked team sports over individual sports. I just liked being in groups and around people. And then if you kind of fast forward to the last few years of my law enforcement career, and I officially retired in 2015, so around those couple of years prior to that up until now, I can now see, looking back, how I really started using that personality to mask what was going on with me. And I really don't like disappointing people. I don't like letting people down. I don't like it when things get awkward socially. Now, I don't like being in groups, especially large social groups. And so for a long time, like the last 10 plus years, I would just kind of always make jokes socially. Like if I can get a group of people laughing, it helps me relax. It helps me feel like I'm not disappointing anyone. And in a way, it makes me feel safe and secure, I guess you could say. And I'm pretty sure, I think if you talk to most people that I've been around for the last 10 years or so, they would probably describe me as outgoing and funny. I would venture to say that they would probably describe me as confident and level-headed. And I'm fairly certain that pretty much every single person in my life thought I was fine when I wasn't. And they would probably tell you that they thought I was a very happy and satisfied person in my life. But the problem is, like, most of it has been an act for a long time. And for a long time, I have had very high functioning anxiety, extremely high functioning anxiety. And like, what does that mean when I say that? Like that basically means that I can get a lot of tasks done and function fairly normally, but inside I'm like in a complete spiral. Like I can show up and get things done and meet deadlines and take care of projects or tasks that need to be taken care of, and I'll look composed and professional doing them, like personally or professionally, but behind the scenes I'm constantly second guessing myself. I'm panicking all the time, and I just get the stuff done. because I don't want anyone to know that something is wrong with me. I don't, like, this is big for me. Like, I don't want people who rely on me to feel let down. I don't like that feeling at all. I don't want to feel like a burden to others. And in fact, like, I kind of crave, I want to know that I am relied upon. I like to know and want to know that people that need me in my life can count on me and rely on me. I like serving other people. Like, I really do like helping others. And I'm sure that played a big role in why I wanted to be a cop. I definitely have a very hard time telling people no, which makes me kind of often overcommit to things that I shouldn't commit to or say yes to, because I just really don't like telling people no. I don't like asking for help, because number one, it means I've got to admit that I have a problem, and that's not going to happen. And two, I really don't want to burden or inconvenience anyone. And I've struggled immensely with depression over the years. It got really bad the past few years, and thankfully I've been able to get it more in check somewhat recently, but for a long time I really, really, really struggled with it. And so I've just put on a mask for all these years. And because of this, I'm often incredibly uncomfortable in social settings. And that's kind of why I like to make people laugh. Like, if the people around me are laughing, that means they're happy in that moment, and nobody is aware of all the turmoil going on inside of my head. And like, here's the sad thing about it. The more I think about it, like, I can put on a big smile, I can be the life of the party, I can laugh and joke and carry on like nothing is wrong, and I can even give people advice that are struggling with things, and I can give them like the right advice that I need to take myself that I'm not even following or taking myself. But inside, I just feel like running away. I feel like crawling into a hole and disappearing, and I want to be anywhere but wherever I'm at with people. So I just sit back and I make people laugh and pretend that I'm okay. And I saw this, I think it was Instagram. It's either Instagram or Facebook post recently, and it said something along the lines. It was like, people don't fake being depressed, they fake being okay. And that like really hit home. That's 100% me a lot of the time, just faking being okay. And here's kind of an example of something that happened recently that I think perfectly illustrates how this plays out in my life all the time. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of you can relate to this story I'm about to tell. But I was at church with my wife a few weeks ago, and before I continue, I want to say that I'm not upset with the person I'm about to talk about. If you've noticed in past episodes, I don't, other than like saying like my wife, and I haven't even said her name, but I don't mention anybody's names. I don't mention the agency I used to work for. I've talked about like training officers or coworkers. Like, I've tried to keep anonymity. I always struggle with that word. I've tried to keep anonymity just to respect people and their privacy and things. But I don't think this person is going to listen to this podcast, but I'm not upset with this person that I'm about to talk about at all. I don't think they did anything wrong, but I just think this story that I'm about to tell helps illustrate kind of just the dichotomy of my external appearance versus my internal reality and struggle and battle that's going on every day. So anyways, I was at church, and after the service, someone came up to me and started asking questions about Ratchet, my service dog. And if you have a service dog, you'll relate to this, but I know most of you probably don't, so I'll kind of try to explain this. But if you have a service dog, you have to prepare yourself for a lot of unwanted and unsolicited attention. I've actually advised people, because I get a lot of questions about service dogs. I've advised people Like if you get a lot of social anxiety and don't like talking to people, and when people come up to you and crowd you and ask questions, if you get a ton of anxiety from that, to where it can kind of make you almost not able to function, you probably shouldn't get a service dog. Because when you are in public, a lot of people will come up to you and ask you about your service dog. And not only that, but a lot. And I mean, a lot of people will ask you why you have a service dog, especially if your disability isn't super obvious right off the bat. I'll be honest, this used to really get on my nerves. When I first got my service dog, like I used to get really bothered and offended by the question of why do you have a service dog? Like, if you see a person in a wheelchair, you would never walk up to them and be like, "Hey bro, why are you in a wheelchair? Tell me why you're in a wheelchair." Like, that's extremely rude. And honestly, it's super rude to ask someone why they have a service dog. But I will say I've gotten a lot more patient and understanding about it the longer I've had Ratchet. And I've come to accept that, like, while it is rude, like, I do still truly believe it's rude. Like, most people aren't intentionally trying to be rude. Like, dogs are cool. A lot of people are dog lovers. People see you with a dog and they're genuinely curious. Like, I get it. I get happy every time I see a dog, so I understand. And then on top of that, like, most people aren't very educated about service dogs. Like, the general public doesn't know a lot about them, and that's not their fault. So I shouldn't hold it against them. And additionally, kind of like what I was saying before, like, I'm not blind or I don't have any clear, obvious physical disability when you look at me. So people are naturally going to be even more curious because it's like, why does this dude have a service dog? And that's why I have a patch on my service dog's vest that says not all disabilities are visible. But that's entirely different discussion for another day. Oh, and I think one more thing that's important to mention is I didn't have a full-time service dog until about 2 years ago. I think 2 years. Actually, a little less than 2 years. Yeah, September will be 2 years that I've had Ratchet. And so there are a lot of people in my life that I have known for a while that I will encounter that I haven't seen for a bit, and now all of a sudden I have a service dog, and I didn't before. So I can understand how that might be a bit perplexing to them, especially considering that, like I said before, I've pretended to be okay for so long, and pretty much everyone in my life had no idea I was struggling in the ways that I've been struggling, and I've always been reasonably fit and in shape, so I don't look disabled anyway. So, like, there's a lot of different reasons for people to be curious about my service dog. But anyways, sorry for that rabbit trail. That's my ADHD mind, so sorry about that. But back to the church situation. So this person came up to me after the service and was asking me questions about Ratchet. And I put a smile on my face and I answered them. And then they asked me what my service dog was trained to do. And, like, when I'm in public and a stranger asks me what kind of service dog I have, I typically just tell people that he's a medical alert service dog. And if they press me, I'll say, hey, he's trained to alert me to a medical condition I have, which is technically accurate. Like, that's not a lie. And I answer this way because it's nobody's business what my medical or mental health history is, especially strangers. And quite frankly, I'm not getting into a discussion with a stranger about my PTSD or mental health. Like, I know a lot of people are just curious and they mean well and they're not trying to be rude, but I'm not telling a stranger that I have PTSD and opening up that can of worms. Like, I'm sure you can understand how that would cause all kinds of, or potentially cause all kinds of uncomfortable situations for myself and whoever's asking the question. But I was at church in this situation, and this person isn't a stranger, and I decided, okay, I'm just going to tell them, hey, I used to be a police officer, and I explained without going into very much detail that Ratchet is my PTSD service dog. But then the person started getting into why they were asking me about Ratchet, and they started telling me about a relative of theirs who's a police officer currently, who is struggling with what he's seen on the job, and they had kind of just deduced from looking at me and my appearance and stuff that Ratchet was a PTSD service dog, so they wanted to ask me about him. So I guess that's why they wanted to ask me about him, which makes sense. And this person started telling me about very specific traumatic incidents that their relative has seen on the job. And they were telling me about how those traumatic incidents were severely negatively impacting their relative. And this person started talking about, just like I said, very specific things their relative had seen. And these stories immediately just started triggering me. And I started thinking about very similar incidents from my time on the job. One of them was a baby thing. And if you listen to the previous episode 3, I talked about a dead baby call that has profoundly impacted me over the years. And while they were talking about all these things, all I wanted to do was just run out of the building. And Ratchet started kind of nudging my hand, which he's trained to do. And so I started kind of petting him and tried to relax while this person was talking to me. And I was talking to them and listening and answering their questions and interacting. And if I start getting amped up or I'm about to have a panic attack, like Ratchet will jump up on me to alert me. And then I'll go sit down or go somewhere private if this happens. And then I'll sit down on the ground and he climbs in my lap and does what's called deep pressure therapy. And I'll just go somewhere private where I can calm down. But it hadn't quite escalated to the point where I needed to walk away and do this. So I just kept talking to the person. But here's the thing. Like, this is why I'm telling this story. This person had no idea of the internal turmoil that was going on inside my head. Like, my brain was in fight or flight mode, and I wanted out of the situation, and I wanted out of the situation now. I wanted out of that conversation and out of that situation immediately. But I stood there, and I tried to show empathy, and I kept listening to them, and I smiled and politely explained that, hey, while I'm not a medical professional, based on the things you're telling me, I believe that your son is most likely suffering from PTSD. And I was giving advice about, hey, they need to go get help and they need to seek counsel, a professional therapist. And I answered their questions they had about, how did you get your service dog? How could my relative get this service dog? And I just stood there and I acted like I had it all figured out. And I was tossing out these solutions for them like I was the dude with all the answers and had it all figured out. And if anyone was around me watching, they would have thought I was having a completely normal conversation. I was smiling. I was calm. I was carrying on a perfectly normal social conversation. But I felt like I was going to explode. And the conversation ended. And as soon as it ended, I made a beeline for the parking lot. Like, took off. And I left my wife in the dust, and I just got back in the truck with Ratchet and waited for her to come out to the parking lot. And my wife wasn't there at the beginning of the conversation with this person, but she had walked up towards the tail end of the conversation and kind of joined in a little bit. So she had heard some of it. And my wife's not stupid. She knows me. She's wise enough to know that it was affecting me. Like, she's very perceptive about that stuff, and I appreciate that a lot about her. And so my wife made her way out to the parking lot. She got back in the truck with me, and I was just sitting there, like, staring blankly out the windshield. And she looked at me, and she just said softly, she's like, "Are you okay?" And that's all it took. Like, I paused for a second, and I said, "Nope." And then I just lost it. I just started sobbing, like, uncontrollably. And I had been sitting in there reliving multiple traumatic incidents in my mind while I was talking to this person. And I was wearing my typical mask that I've worn for years, just acting like everything was fine. I smiled and I carried on the conversation while a war was raging inside of me. And I kept it together and faked it until my wife asked if I was okay. And then it was like the dam broke. No, I was not okay. And again, like, real quick, I want to make clear that this person didn't do anything wrong. I'm not mad at them or upset with them. They are a very nice and sweet person, and they were just genuinely trying to seek out some help or advice for a loved one, and I am certain they had no idea how it was affecting me. And I'm also sure, I'm positive that they would feel terrible if I told them how this conversation impacted me, and I don't want them to feel bad at all. But I tell you this story because it illustrates the story of my life for the last 10 plus years. I look fine on the outside. I can answer people's questions, and I can be professional and execute tasks. I'm highly functional. I can smile and make people laugh and show empathy and show sympathy. I can stand there and give someone mental health advice about law enforcement, PTSD, and service dogs. And it's all a lie. It's all a lie. I am wearing a mask and pretending that everything is fine when it is absolutely not fine. And in fact, I am often falling apart and on the edge and just on the verge of losing it. I often think about Robin Williams, and I was literally just talking about him with my wife earlier today. And he was such a funny and joyful man, very eccentric, very just crazy in a fun, awesome way. And he made literally millions of people laugh, millions of people. His smile was infectious, and he had everything going for him, and he brought so much joy to people's lives. But all of that, and yet internally he was falling apart. And he unfortunately took his own life. And I looked up a quote from him while I was making notes for this episode, and he said, quote, where is it? I've got it here. Quote, "I think the saddest people always try their hardest to make people happy because they know what it's like to feel absolutely worthless, and they don't want anyone to feel that." End quote. And I feel that quote in my bones. I often feel worthless. I often feel helpless. I often feel like I'm more of a burden than a help to people around me. I have struggled with thoughts about suicide. And I don't want anyone else to feel like that, especially the people around me that I care about. And if I can put on a fake smile and make everyone around me laugh, it seems like it makes things better in some way. And I think my current personality would really confuse a lot of people. I mean, heck, it confuses me. I really enjoy being alone. I enjoy it a lot. But I can also be very outgoing and social, and I think my environment can kind of influence and dictate that a little bit. But I have this odd battle that goes on in my head every single day where I really enjoy being alone while simultaneously hating being lonely. It's a very bizarre dichotomy that goes on with me. I just want to be alone a lot of the time, but then I get really upset that I'm lonely and I feel like nobody cares. And then people will reach out because they do care, and then I push them away or avoid talking to them. And it's just, I don't even know how to explain it because it's so opposite. And I have a buddy. He recently texted me, and he said something it was like, "Hey bro, I'm going to call you in a bit. Feel free to answer if you feel like you're up for it, but if not, no pressure." And he called, and of course I did not answer, and I feel guilty about it, but man, it felt good to get a text like that. He Like, what a good friend. Like, he knew there was a good chance that I would not answer or would not want to talk. And not only did he still call me, he let me know that it was okay if I didn't answer. But hey, I'm going to call you, and if you don't answer, it's okay. That's a good dude and a good friend. And most people would just give up trying after being ignored for a while. And so I have this really weird battle where I want people to care, but then I'm scared to talk to anyone when they do care. And then I want to be alone, but then I get mad that I'm lonely. And it's hard to describe because it doesn't really make sense. But it's how I feel. So where am I at with all of this? And like, what am I doing to overcome this? And that's kind of a good question. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know. Like I don't have an answer for this right now. I don't have some solution for you. I don't really know how to overcome this. But I wanted to share this because I know some of you are out there struggling with this same thing right now. And sometimes we don't need an answer or a solution. We just need to know that we're not alone. We need to know that we aren't the only people struggling with these things. We need to know that it's okay to not be okay. And we need to know that there's other people out there that are just like us. Like, it's not just me. It's not just you going through this stuff. And I know that there's a lot of you out there that are putting on a mask every single day because there are people out there that rely on you. And you don't want to be a burden to them. You don't want to let them down. You don't want them to know that you're struggling. And I know what it's like to be embarrassed that you're struggling. I know what it's like when everybody thinks you're really strong and you're really not. You're really weak. And I know what it's like to refuse to admit that you have a problem. I know how hard it is to ask for help. Like, I get it. I understand it. Like, I live this battle every single day. I've told you, if you've listened to previous episodes, that I'm currently in recovery for alcoholism. I'm basically in recovery for my PTSD as well, to be honest. But there are a lot of different recovery programs out there, a lot. But virtually all 12-step programs have a first step that has something to do with acceptance. That's usually what the first step is about. And it's about acknowledging your powerlessness over your addiction or your problem or whatever it is, and that your life has become unmanageable because of it. And like I said, I don't have all the answers for you, but acceptance is a big deal. I said it in my first episode, like, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay. And if you're struggling with your mental health, there's a reason for that. Like, something happened to you along the way, and your brain is having a normal reaction to an abnormal circumstance or circumstances. You might be a first responder or a veteran. You might not. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you've seen 1,000 traumatic incidents in your lifetime or you've had one singular traumatic experience in your life. All it takes is one to impact our mental health. So work on acceptance. Work on understanding that while you may not feel normal, you are having a normal reaction to extraordinary circumstance or circumstances. Work on acknowledging that, hey, I've got a problem. Work on acknowledging and accepting that you've been powerless over that problem. And work on accepting and acknowledging that your life or parts of your life have become completely unmanageable because of that problem. And then ask for help. It doesn't even have to be professional help right away. Ask for help from your spouse or significant other. Ask for help from a friend or family member. Like, I get it. Like, pretending to be okay, it might seem like you're doing a noble thing for those that are around you, particularly your loved ones. But in the end, it doesn't really matter if you completely fall apart or have a breakdown or worse. Like, as I examine my life more and more, especially lately, while it's easy for me to say, hey, I was pretending, I was wearing a mask, I was faking it for a good reason, it really often just boils down to pride. And that's hard to admit. But I have been too prideful in a lot of ways. Too prideful to ask for help, too prideful to admit that I'm not okay, too prideful because I'm embarrassed and I want people to rely on me. And some of these reasons can seem noble, like I said, but pride is not noble. But just know that I've been too prideful in a lot of ways, and I can admit that. And hopefully that can help you admit that. And I know there are going to be a lot of you out there that this episode resonates with. Wearing the mask and pretending everything's okay. And just know that you're not alone. You're not alone. I appreciate you all. I'm Jason Demo, and this is the Silent Siren. And we urge you, brothers, admonish the idle, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with them all. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 14.